Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott. You know him as B. Scott. Well, another incredible Indianapolis 500 in the books. It was soggy at first, but it got going and it was a lot of fun. And we're going to discuss the greatest spectacle in racing today. We're going to tie a bow on all the action from Sunday, discussing our surprises, our standout performances from the day. We're going to talk about, some of the future for IndyCar, the aftermath of the 500. Because really, I know it's only the fifth race of the year. There's 17 races. It's not the official halfway point, but it kind of feels like that. It almost feels like the Indy 500 is the month of May is the all-star break of, obviously it counts, the only all-star game that counts, but it feels like the all-star break because it feels like the breaking of the two halves of the season, and the month of May is its own thing. So I've always looked at the aftermath of Indy as the second half. So we're going to talk about the second half of the season. We're going to talk about Josef Newgarden. Is he in the catbird seat for the championship now? McLaren had a strong May. We're going to wrap that up. So gonna be talking about a lot of stuff regarding the Indy 500 and IndyCar. Like I said, tie a bow on the whole month of May. But first and foremost, B. Scott, we have to air it out here. What was your plan, and what did you do during the 4-hour rain delay? What were you up to during that time?
Okay, so I park in the track, obviously, with wheelchair parking. So me and my buddies, well, the guy I drove down with, my buddy that I drove down with, we got there about maybe 15 minutes prior to the rain hitting. Like, we got there and we were told, you don't even worry about going in. They're sending everybody out. And we parked literally right by our gate. It was great. So some other people met up with us and we all piled into my van and tailgated in the van. Like, literally, I had people sitting in my kids' car seats and we were grabbing beers from the trunk, people sitting on the floor of my van. It was a party. And then once it got done, proceeded to where we were going to watch the race and stayed nice and dry and had several cold bevies and watched a great race.
Yeah, it was a fantastic race. I actually lost touch with my group during the rain delay, and I was under the awning of a first aid building, and so I stayed relatively dry. I had a poncho on. When the rain started coming sideways, I got a little wet. But I ended up. It was a very interesting experience because I was next to a younger guy. And I presume his father. I didn't really, the dynamic between the two is kind of odd, but I assume it was his dad. And at first, I was not a fan of this guy because he was talking. He had first of all, he was talking about how he had a helicopter ride into the track. How he woke up at like 10:30 and got there at like 10:40, and I was like, that's not the Indy 500 experience. Sit in traffic like the rest of us. And then he was talking about how great the lobster rolls are. He's like, oh yeah, I've had lobster rolls from everywhere, and this is one of the best I've ever had. It has no business being this good. So, I was like,
right, you can buy lobster rolls. I think one of the concession stands actually.
No, I know, but look, I associate lobster with the bougie.
If he was talking about like king crab or anything like that, then yeah, you can. Look, punch him in his douche nose.
No, but. Yeah, no. So anyway, I assumed. It's track food. I never eat track food, so I assumed it was like $300. I don't know, but
I don't know.
But anyway,
it's not guaranteed you're gonna be feeling great the next day. But
he said it was amazing.
Well, I will say this: lobster rolls and like shrimp hoagies, those types of things. That is poor man's, like, fancy.
Real. So I was thinking anything lobster is bougie is what I've thought.
No, like this is a sandwich. This is legitimately a sandwich filled with mayo and celery, and it's like chicken salad, but you've got not the greatest end of lobster, but
Well, heck, by the end of this, he offered me one, so I should have taken him up on it.
He did, and you didn't.
I didn't. Yeah, I know. It's hard to believe I would turn down food, but I mean,
if somebody that came in on a helicopter just said that this is the best lobster roll I've ever had, you know it's probably really good.
Well,
Because there's some places that it is bougie, where it is like, Maine, the New England area. Yeah, you can get like fancy lobster roll, but like,
well, hey, look, by
I,
the end of it, we were, we became friends. He grew on me,
okay,
because he was talking about how, he's enjoying being in the Midwest. His wife wanted to move back to the Midwest because, he's from Phoenix, but his wife wanted to enjoy like having seasons again. But then he's also talking about moving to Vegas, and I was like, okay, so 1 year of the 4 seasons, and you're and you're done with it. You're like,
back to the desert.
you're like
Well,
back
Craig,
to
if you're upset that he had a helicopter ride, you're not gonna like me then, because
hey,
where we parked this year. We parked in the turn 2 VIP parking lot
nice.
right at the golf course.
Were
Like
you?
literally, one of the yellow shirts moved her van so I could get a better spot to unload my wheelchair. And then we proceeded to watch the race from the 3rd floor of the turn 2 suites.
I know I did see where you were at. I was like, that's not where I thought he was going to be, but I was happy about it. So I was actually thinking that, like, if Kyle Kirkwood's crash last year would have happened,
I would have watched the tire go
I was
by.
going to say, would your van have been in danger?
Would have gotten hit. Because my buddy and I talked about that. I said, yeah, last year a woman's car was basically right where we are, because we were parked with like a lot of the workers because of
Right.
the wheelchair, and my car would have been right in the firing zone of Kyle Kirkwood's tire.
Okay, I was wondering that. But yeah, no, he offered me a lobster roll because I gave him my extra poncho. So
I
yeah,
think you would have gotten the better end of the bargain.
I think so, because it wasn't even like a good poncho. It's just like one of those like $3 ones you can buy from like Walmart. So
now, I have worn one of your ponchos before, and those are good ponchos.
they are. They're
They
quality.
they kept us dry before that Purdue Oregon State game.
They did.
It just, you walked around Purdue campus and it just rained on us.
Where we like had a whole, like, we thought we were gonna record like a whole lot more content, and it just ended up being just us sitting around because there was just raining the whole day.
Yeah, it was bad.
Oh,
But,
man.
dude, you would have come out better on that deal because the rain went away and he had no use for the poncho. You would have
Whereas
walked away with a full belly.
I would have. That is true. I should have taken him up on it now that I think about it. Hey, look, I thought my group left me, so I was kind of trying to like schmooze them a little bit, because I was gonna be like, hey, can you just take me home on your helicopter? I live.
Just push me out.
Yeah, just push me out when you get close to where I live. But yeah, that was the highlight of the first few hours at the Speedway, because as we get into our race summary and our Indy 500 recap, it was a 4-hour one. It was a while, and I was a little bummed because I thought the way everything was laying out and all the people on X that I saw talking about the rain, I thought it was going to be, I thought we were going to get some laps in, which was like the only thing like kind of getting me, because I knew there was going to be 2 waves. And so I was like, okay, if we can at least get like 30 to 50 laps in before the rain, then we're in good shape in that second window. But when they were talking about 11:15, I was like, oh no, I don't know about this.
You should have texted me. I had all my people asking me, what's going to happen? How do you think is going to happen? I said, look, it's going to start raining about 12:15. It's going to go until about 1:45, 2 o'clock. It'll be out of there by then. It takes 77 minutes to dry this track. 77 minutes. We should get racing about 4 o'clock, and sun doesn't go down until a little after 8. We should be able to get this whole thing in. The next round doesn't get until almost midnight. Sure enough, starts raining about 12:15. Out of there by 2 o'clock, racing by 4. Everybody was like, how did you know? It's just like, I paid a lot of attention to
you know what the lowdown is. But we finally got the green flag at 4:45. It's a sunny day, but on lap 1, turn 1, shades of Scott Sharp, although this wasn't from the pole, Tom Blomqvist spins, taking out Marcus Ericsson and Pietro Fittipaldi. That's your opening lap of the Indy 500.
There's something interesting about that wreck. I don't know if Tom Blomqvist got injured or whatnot, but today he was let go by
yeah. Well, he's being replaced for 2 races, so I don't know if that means he's
2 races. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so they said Elio is the sub, and I was going to talk about that more a little bit later, just because we don't. I didn't. All I know is that he's been replaced for those 2 races. I don't know if it's an injury, or what it is, but I just thought it was funny after all that with Marcus Ericsson. Like Marcus Ericsson might just have had the worst month that you can think of, with the practice crash, forgetting what lap he's on during qualifying and almost getting bumped, and then crashing in lap 1, turn 1. Not a good one for him.
That's after coming off of winning the race and almost winning the race last year.
Almost becoming the first back-to-back driver since Elio to win it.
Yeah.
Scott McLaughlin, once we finally get going, Green, 9 laps in, Scott McLaughlin will lead the first 23 laps from the pole. Lap 28, Linus Lundqvist spins and makes contact with the wall, bringing out the yellow. 5th caution of the day comes out at lap 86 with Colton Herta crashing between turn 1 and 2. Andretti's terrible day continues when Marco Andretti also gets involved in a turn 1 crash on lap 114. Kyle Larson, who elected to stay and run the 500, was given a penalty for speeding on pit road on lap 132, putting a damper on his day. He was running well. He was in contention before that penalty. And then Will Power brings out the final yellow of the race on lap 147. Josef Newgarden and Alexander Rossi trade the lead back and forth as the race is coming to a close. Pato O'Ward joins the mix when he takes the lead on lap 195. Newgarden takes the lead with 4 laps to go, but coming to the final lap, O'Ward gets a great run and passes Newgarden, but Newgarden, kind of like what he did last year, gets a great run on the backstretch and passes O'Ward to take the lead back in turn 3.
Outside. He passed him on the outside.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable. That was a gutsy move, too, because that could have easily gone sideways.
Right. So Josef Newgarden ends up winning the Indy 500. Back-to-back races he's won now. He wins the 108th running. He's the first driver since Elio Castroneves to accomplish that feat, to win in back-to-back years. He led 26 laps. He now moves up to 7th in points. Pato O'Ward finishes 2nd. Scott Dixon 3rd. Alexander Rossi and Alex Palou make up the top 5. Other notable finishers, Scott McLaughlin, who led the most laps, finishes 6th. Connor Daly moves from 29th on the grid to finish 10th. Christian Rasmussen.
Great pitch strategy by him. Great pitch strategy.
I was going to say, honestly, like when he was still like making it work and like getting like cycling back through to the front, I was like, is Connor Daly going to win this race? Because I'm all for it.
I was wondering that.
As honestly, like, look, when I think about this month of May for Connor Daly, I talked about the drippiest driver in the paddock. That's Connor Daly. He's got the Jeff Gordon shoes, the Jeff Gordon helmet. I was like, with a spot, I don't know what Polka Dot does, but I was like, with a sponsor like Polka Dot, could you have leaned into the Rainbow Warriors scheme a little bit with your Jeff Gordon like stuff? Could you have incorporated that into the livery? Probably. But I was like, man, like I would love nothing more than to see Connor Daly win this race, and it looked like it might work.
And Ryan Bold.
Right. I mean, look, it was better. Look, Stingray Robb led meaningful laps in this race. I texted my buddy, no disrespect to Stingray Robb, but I was like, this feels so weird that he's leading this race right now, and not just like, oh, he led like 1 lap and then cycled through pit strategy. Like, no, he was continuously leading for a while. But yeah, no, Connor Daly, a great run by him. Christian Rasmussen is the highest finishing rookie. Crossing the line 12th, Kyle Larson finishes 18th, and Elio Castroneves finishes 20th. So
there was a point where I thought Elio he was up there near the front. I was like, are we going to see history?
Yeah.
Are we going to see him come home with number 5 today? Because he was up there. It was looking solid for him.
Yeah. So when I look at surprises from this race and kind of takeaways from this one, I was really surprised at the level of attrition and the cars going out early. 1 caution in the first 100 laps last year, 2 the year before that, just 2 cautions total in 2021. There were 5 cautions before the first 100 laps were completed this year. Now 2 were for mechanical failures with Catherine Legg and Felix Rosenquist blowing their engines. But 4 cars total with mechanical issues early, when you talk about Callum Eilert having issues before the race even starts. And then you have Marcus Armstrong with his issues as well. But 3 were actual accidents. Now, I don't know that they were necessarily, they weren't like, only one was a multi-car crash. But so it wasn't like necessarily drivers fighting for position. It was some drivers just kind of getting out of it and not taking the best line and losing it. But just it was just odd to me because I even texted my buddy Spencer. I was like, I would have expected to see this level of attrition if the rain was like impending and we were closer to halfway. But I was like, this is the very beginning of the race and people are falling out of it left and right. I was just very surprised. I mean, I was like, I know we're fighting daylight. I know there's another round of storms looming, but the level of aggression that early was something that was really catching my eye because I was like, why is there so much aggressiveness this early in the race?
Well, I think it was because they knew there was a time limit. It was, 8:15. So you don't know. So you want to get as best position as possible. But 2, I mean, look at it. The track was green. That was heavy rain. And, those any grooves may have been gone. It just seemed like a lot of people just lost it, which was weird. For me, I think the biggest surprise was, man, we already kind of hit on it with Connor Daly and Stingray Robb, but how the pitch strategy, the off-sequence strategies really worked because eventually then Scott Dixon, who, he was running mid-pack, wasn't really there or out of it. But then all of a sudden he goes off sequence with his pitch strategy and he's up there contending for the win. So it was typically it's hit or miss on strategies. If you go off sequence, and 9 times out of 10, the people that stay on sequence are the ones that ultimately come out on top. So I was really surprised to see how well the different strategies worked. And then also just the fact that down at the end, at least for most drivers, I can't speak for Alexander Rossi because I know Scott Dixon got past him because he let off the gas. Alexander Rossi let off the gas. He had 3rd place locked up and all of a sudden slowed down significantly, and Dixon blew by him for 3rd. But there really wasn't anybody having to conserve fuel. From what it was sounding like, everybody was good to go or above and beyond good to go. So that was a little different than in years past, where it seems like it comes down to saving some fuel, making that last run. Mostly it's because they're saving fuel, so their last pit stop, they don't have to be in the pits nearly as long. But I think I was just surprised at the different strategies and how well they actually worked compared to years past. I think it may have something to do with how many cautions we saw. I mean, you're right. And I will say this last thing about the level of attrition. If your last name ended with Quist, it was not a good day for you.
No.
Say at all. Like Tom Bloomquist, and then
Linus Lundqvist.
Linus Lundqvist, and I
Felix
look at my buddy
Rosenqvist.
and I go, man, if I'm Felix Rosenqvist, I am a little nervous. And then sure enough, a few laps later, Felix Rosenqvist gone.
Yeah.
I bet all the announcers were either like, oh my gosh, we have to talk about them because they're out, or now they're like, yes, they're out of the race. We don't have to try to get tongue-tied with all the different twists out there in the field.
Yeah, no, it was wild, the amount of cautions early, because I was definitely baffled, because like I said, I was, and I think, part of it I think was too because we were expecting like, okay, once we get going, the last few years, we've had such long green flag runs. By the end of it, well, of course we got the longest green flag run at the end, which was nice, but I was like, by the end of it, I was like, man, can we get like 20, 30 green flag laps, please? That'd be great. Now, looking back on the race as a whole, we do this sometimes where we give an award, not an official award, not something you've heard of before. We just give an award to a driver, that we've made up for this occasion. So for the Indy 500, my award that I'm giving out from the race is the next TK award. Because, man, we've touched on it a little bit, but I feel for Pato O'Ward, man. Like seeing the reaction of him just getting out and like leaning on his car, and then just getting hugs from everyone and crying and all that kind of stuff. Like, man, because I forgot honestly that he finished second a couple years ago too. And I was like, man, that's really rough. It's his second, like I said, second Indy 500 runner-up finish in 3 years. He was in it last year before the crash that he had. To see the emotion he had after coming so close was heartbreaking. His emotion and his respect for the Indy 500 and what it means reminds me a lot of Tony Kanaan. Look, it took TK until his 12th Indy 500 to win. The guy that Pato O'Ward got beat by also waited 12 years before his first, Josef Newgarden. I hope it finally happens for him. I think it will. One of my predictions coming away from the Indy 500 is that he will win one before his contract is up in 2027. I think he is going to win one sooner rather than later, just because he's been so close. And you know what? I hope this doesn't turn into a thing where it starts to get into your head, because that can kind of, creep into my mind. Because listening to his interview, he was like, I don't know what else I could have done, man. I was putting my car through things that, I didn't think I was going to come out the other side, and we just managed to do it every time. And that could it can creep up on you, man, because like if he's in that same situation, he's going to be like, what's going to go wrong this time? And that can kind of get in your head a little bit. But I think he's going to do it. I hope he does. I think I slowly have become a Pato O'Ward fan, like after this weekend, because man, I like Josef Newgarden, but I was hoping Pato would have hung on and won it, because I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, mine was always a bridesmaid, never the bride award, and that for Pato O'Ward. The other one I would look at is trying to have the best way to describe it, but maybe the melter. Listen, follow me. We call Scott Dixon the Iceman. Scott Dixon always seems to be there, contending for the win, and then that elusive second victory just falls through his fingers. This track knows how to melt the Iceman, especially late in a race, where typically Scott Dixon, like when he took the lead and he was on a different strategy, I was like, Scott Dixon's going to win this thing, because this is his time to shine. This is what he does, is late in races, he just takes over, and it fell through his grasp yet again. So that is it's called the melter, is my award, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm telling you, Pato O'Ward, I think you're right, is the next TK as far as like that track favorite, because he's always so close. And yeah, he's going to get there. I agree. I was going to say the same thing about him. I think he's going to get one sooner rather than later. I don't think it's going to take 12 tries. I think he's going to get one here in the next couple of years. He's in the right team with the right car that consistently gets him up there for this race. So.
And I'm glad that you mentioned his team, because I was looking back, I was like, what can we do to kind of really just, put the cherry on top of this month of May? And I was like, you know what? We did MVQ after our qualifying preview for most valuable qualifier. I was like, let's give out a most valuable May. Who had the most valuable May this year, and it's hard not to say Josef Newgarden, but I'm gonna go with Arrow McLaren as a team. I mean, we questioned when we did our Indy 500 preview, we were like, should they even still be considered one of the best teams in the sport? Because they were not doing so hot. I mean, coming into May, their season had been a crap show. I mean, Pato O'Ward was involved in several incidents at Barber. He and Rossi made contact at Long Beach, giving O'Ward a penalty. O'Ward sat 6th in points. Rossi was 12th. And even after the Sancio Grand Prix, I mean, Rossi was the highest finishing McLaren, who finished 8th. I mean, Pato blew an engine in warm-up for that race. So, things were not looking great for McLaren, and you're just kind of like, ugh, I don't know what's going on with them. But on the whole, May was a bounce-back month for that team. And I'm not just schmoozing them because I said one of their drivers may not qualify. That was my prediction with how crazy of a start to their season they had. Award and Rossi make the Fast 12 in qualifying. Rossi makes the Fast 6. Kyle Larson, who's doing the double with the team, he qualified in the Fast 6 as well and had a solid performance before the penalty. Callum Ilott hopped in the car for the first time since St. Pete and finished 11th. Rossi and Award were both in play for the win. Award is now 4th in points and Rossi's 8th. So they come out on the other side of the month of May better in points. Running a little bit better, where I think, I went from thinking, man, they're not one of the top teams in the sport anymore, to being like, I think they're somebody's from their camp is going to get a win before this year's over.
Technically, Pato has a win.
A win on track is what I mean.
Yes.
Because, I know. Which I'm glad that you said that, actually, because when they announced when they were announcing the driver introductions, which, by the way, I don't want to get off on a tangent and beat old man yells at cloud, but when we were waiting on the track to dry and stuff, I was like, I know the pageantry and stuff is important, but I was like, can we get through some of the stuff that doesn't require the track while we're waiting on the track to dry so we could get racing a little bit sooner? I was like, can we do driver introductions now?
They did cut out part of driver introductions where they put them in the back of trucks and drive them around the track.
They did do that, but I was like, can we sing back home again in Indiana and do driver introductions while we're drying the track? I know that would be there would be a section that may not hear a little bit of it because I'm
so glad they didn't, because that flyover during back home again in Indiana,
it was great. No, that was just the selfish. That was just the selfish person in me being like, "Can we get through some of this stuff? Because I want to see racing, man."
That was I had the same thoughts running through my head. For me, I was even like, "Let's do driver introductions and put them in trucks," because guess what? When you start getting more friction out there on the track, it's going to dry quicker.
Put them on the jet dryers. Oh, okay.
I mean, for goodness sakes, can Doug Bowles get out there and start running around in some old cars just to? What
is the purpose of the trucks with little shopping cart wheels on the back of them? I've never seen that before.
Those are NASCAR.
Really?
That's NASCAR. They rented those from NASCAR. What those are high pressure. It's like a high pressure blower that pushes the air right down into the track and makes the moisture come up and out. So that way, in NASCAR, you always hear on some of these tracks you have the weepers, where the track will start leaking somewhere. These dryers prevent that from happening. It gets deep down in, but I think they started realizing these things aren't working quite as well as our old-fashioned fighter jets that we could roll out there. Because all of a sudden those things came out and the track was dry.
Right. Because I was like, I was watching those things go by and I was like, I don't think this is doing anything. I think this might take 4 hours to dry going at this rate. Because I was like, I don't know what this is actually doing.
I will say, but yeah, they are. NASCAR uses them, and that's what they're for. I think it worked because they used those, they pushed the pressure down, and then they got the water out, and then the jet dryers came through and cleared all that up. So you didn't have any. I guess the whole process worked, but hey, I don't know.
Yeah, but no,
it was quick. It was still pretty quick. I will have to admit, because even we're sitting there over the track in turn 2 and just looking down, and I look at my buddy and I go, "That thing's drying really quickly." He goes, "Yeah, it is." And then we look down the backstretch, and you could clearly see the how the progress they're making, and it was like, wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting during driver introductions when they were like, St. Petersburg winner, Pato Award, which I know obviously that's technically true, but I was like, no, yeah, I mean, I guess technically, but it just feels weird. It'd be like if, I mean, it'd be like if if you're at if Michigan were to raise a 2013 like national championship banner, like it's like, or when UCF, although that's not the same thing because that's not cheating, that's just them proclaiming to be champions. But like Michigan, if after the 2013 where they lost to Louisville in the Final Four, being like, we actually won because they cheated, so. It's different because it's actually sanctioned through IndyCar is what happened, and that's why it's the way it is. But I just was like, I don't know. It was like, I mean, I don't know. Interesting that he chose to go with that as the introduction for a award, but I think I might have lost B Sky here. Well, B Sky, can you hear me? I was like, he might just be disgusted with my take, or maybe he can't hear me. Now I'm paused. Interesting. Are we back?
I think we're back. You turned into like the robot from Lost in Space.
I was about to pause the recording because I was like, I don't know if you just didn't get my take or what's going on, but yeah, no, I just was like, I guess it's not odd that they announced him that way. It just caught me off guard because I was like, I guess, yeah, technically, but
technically he's a winner. But what's weird is that when you look at the standings on the IndyCar website, they don't list him as having a win.
Really, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, he doesn't have a win listed, but if you go back through the schedule, he's shown as the winner.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay,
interesting. So before we move on to look at the second half of the season, I wanted to make a bold prediction coming out of the 500. Like, what is a thought that we had? And I'm honestly, B. Scott, I'm a little worried about saying this because when I originally texted you this on Sunday, I did not get a response from you. So I was like, I don't know.
No service.
Well, that's also true. Now I'm just putting that together. So
I saw the text when I got home that night.
Okay.
I was like,
So maybe that explains it, but I think this is my bold prediction is I think this is the beginning of Hendrick Motorsports having at least some affiliation with IndyCar. I'm not bold enough to say they're going to have a full-fledged team out there in the future, but I don't know. I think allowing Larson to forego. Or Larson choosing to forego the Coke 600 and risk his 2024 NASCAR season, because I know he's going to get a waiver, but like as of right now, he doesn't. So you never know. But
okay, so explain to me, why does he need a waiver when he's got multiple wins?
So I honestly don't 100% understand it either. But you have to run every race essentially. You have to run every race to be eligible. Now I will say, it should not matter. If they're like range-shortened races or races that aren't run to completion shouldn't count towards that.
Right, because he was in the car,
right,
ready to go.
Right, but also
we're not going to run anymore.
But also, once you run a lap, like once Justin Allgaier ran a lap, he's the one that gets the point. So technically, I think Larson would have not been counted anyway, even though he's there.
There's a DNF for him.
I don't know, but yeah, no, it's. So, but the thing is that waivers get given out all the time. They gave out a waiver to Chase Elliott last year after missing the time that he missed because of his injury, and then also wrecking Denny Hamlin. Yeah. And then Kyle Busch got a waiver when he like broke his back and missed like 7 races. So like they give out the waiver. It's honestly like, and it's because you miss the race, you run the risk of not being like above the points threshold to make the playoffs. But yeah, which like I've seen people be like, okay, well then take away the restriction to have a win on the season. Especially when 3 of those wins are at, because one of the races is in the playoffs, but when 4 of those races are restrictor plate races on the year, and 3 of them could potentially randomly choose. It's basically the lottery. You might happen to be at the front at the end and win a race and be in the playoffs. So it's a little weird. But also because they're so like wishy-washy with it, then there's probably like it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And only people that are not fans of Kyle Larson are saying don't give him the waiver. I mean, you even have Kevin Harvick like on his podcast saying, look, he deserves the waiver because what he just did was meant so much to the world of racing. It did enormous amounts of good for IndyCar. It did enormous amounts of good for NASCAR. It brought fans across the aisles
Yeah.
for each other because people wanted to see it. What he did was amazing for the sport in general, and it stinks that Mother Nature didn't allow it to happen.
Yeah.
So
I was really
if there's
bummed
anybody
because
that's deserving of a waiver, it's somebody that at least he was out there trying to advance the sport and make things, grow fan bases and everything.
yeah, I was
But
bummed because go ahead.
on top of your point though, there is a picture during the rain delay. I'm pretty sure it was at IMS because it was daylight out. There's a picture of on a bus, Roger Penske, Rick Hendrick, and Zach Brown from the president CEO of McLaren. So they were all together. So you might be. I feel like after I saw that picture, I was like, huh, he might be onto something.
Well, because it just
Especially with Hendrick Motorsports now expanding more and starting to run more, especially in like the Xfinity series. He's seeing the success that Roger Penske's having. He wants to be Roger Penske level. I mean, Hendrick is, the top of the NASCAR world, but you want to be top of the motorsports world, which is a big reason why Hendrick Motorsports led the charge for having a car race at Le Mans. So you might actually be onto something.
Well, and like, hey, look, I was right about Indy eventually running on the road course. I will take that to my grave, as though I will forever use that as like I was right about that, so I'm right about all things. That's what I'm going to use for the rest of my life. Because when we interviewed, what show was that on? I think it was Race Week and Rewind back at Ball State, where we interviewed Robin Miller, the late Robin Miller, and I suggested that I was like, do you think IndyCar would ever run on the road course at IMS? And he was like, no, that will never happen. And then it happened. So I will take that win to my grave and use it to justify all other wins and all other opinions. But no, it just was a weird, I don't know, the way it struck me was just the fact that I was like, now granted, I don't know how badly Kyle Larson, wants to win the Indy 500. I don't know if he has that same, I mean, obviously right, but also like it's just, and I don't know if I'm fault, because I was thinking to myself, even like, am I giving Kyle Larson the Patrick Mahomes treatment, like thinking everything he does, if another driver did it, I wouldn't bat an eye at it, but yet when he does it, I'm like, well, maybe, because like when he ran out of gas on Fast Friday, I was like, he's testing to see how long he can push the fuel strategy. He might win it on Sunday. When if it was any other driver, I'd be like, what an idiot, he ran out of gas. But I was like, just the way it struck me was, he could have just, and I know experience is key, he wanted to actually get out and run the race. I think honestly he was getting a little annoyed with all the practices and all that kind of stuff. He just wanted to go run the race. But at the same time, and he, like, obviously he said he wants to do it again, but also, like, if he is wanting to do it again, why wouldn't he just go ahead and be like, you know what, today wasn't our day, let's just go back and, now granted, I don't know how much it played into it, the fact that he actually had a driver ready to take over for him at the Coke 600 as opposed to the IndyCar. So I don't know if he wanted to, like, if he was like, well, I can't let the rest of this team down that's put this whole month together, and then I just say, well, sorry, I'm leaving to go do the Coke 600. Sorry, boys. But yeah, no, I just, I don't know, the way that struck me was like, I could see them, like I said, I'm not going to sit here and say that we're going to see, Pato Award in the Hendrick Cars IndyCar, running, Long Beach in a couple of years. I just think that, I was like, I'm saying more like kind of like we see, like when we saw with like Andretti Steinbrenner, for a little bit, like, something like that where, it's maybe like McLaren Hendrick and there's a specific driver in that car. So I could see him dabbling in that a bit just to kind of cross that frontier into IndyCar. So that I don't know. That's just the way that it struck me. I may just be taking something way out of proportion, but that's just the vibes I get.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. It wouldn't be surprising because Rick Hendrick, I could see him wanting to get up there with Penske and have, because like look, Penske's had success in sports cars too. So it's like Hendrick's like, man, I can do this. I got that kind of money too. So my bold prediction coming out of the Indy 500, going into next year's 500, has a lot to do with NASCAR as well. I actually think you're going to see two NASCAR drivers try to run the double next year. You're going to see Kyle Larson do it again. And I think you're also going to see Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch has expressed significant interest. His brother has done it already once, not successfully, but he did it. And even this year, Kyle Busch has talked about it frequently. So my bold prediction is that two NASCAR drivers will run the double next year. Two Kyles.
I would love to see that, to be honest. Those would probably be
that would be interesting to see Kyle Busch's aggressiveness in an IndyCar.
Oh, yeah. See Kyle Busch running around there in the
we all know Kyle Busch runs very well on the oval.
Mm-hmm. One of the last winners of the Brickyard 400 before they went to the road course.
And he has run away with that race. Now, granted, it's totally different, but still, it would be interesting. And I could see that. I honestly could see that happening.
Now, look, M&M's. I know he's gonna bring whatever sponsorship he's got from NASCAR, but I'm just gonna throw this out here. M&M's. I know you're not watching this podcast at 41 minutes in, but if you are, please strike some sort of deal. I want to see an M&M sponsored IndyCar. I want to see it. I think it'd be awesome.
What Alex Pallou's
was pretty close. It was close.
It was pretty darn close.
Yeah. But I would love to see that. I kind of regretted not getting any Kyle Larson merch this year. That might be enough to get me some Kyle Busch, some Kyle Larson merch.
Really nice stuff too.
Yeah, for sure.
I waited too long. I saw one that was, it was on the back. It was his NASCAR and then his IndyCar.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, that's pretty nice.
I saw that one too. Yeah, that was a good one. So looking ahead to the second half of the season, so the point standings heading out of Indy, you've got Alex Palou leading the points right now. Scott Dixon is second, back by 20 points. Will Power is third, 26 points back. Pato O'Ward is 49 points back in fourth, and Colton Herta is 49 points back and rounds out the top five. So got a couple of hot or cold questions coming out of the 500. I was trying to think of more, but it was just like, well, we already talked about McLaren quite a bit, and we've also there's not really much to talk about with Ganassi coming out of the 500 just because their 500 was kind of meh, but then you also have their two drivers are on top of the point standing, so it's kind of a weird season for them to not be a factor at all in May, but then also be on top of the point standings coming out of it. So, I mean, I'll almost put it in there and be like, is Ganassi having the quietest championship run of all time? Because, I mean, they did win the Grand Prix, I guess, but still kind of a quiet time for them. So I only have a question for a couple of the teams here, but the first hot or cold question is this. Hot or cold, Josef Newgarden will win the 2024 IndyCar title. And for me, that's a hot take. He was my pick coming into the year. And after the month of May I think he's right back in the thick of things. Because I wondered, when he was coming into May, sitting 16th in points, I was like, is he because of all the the penalties and stuff, is he too far back to even make a run at this thing? But he comes in, puts the car on the front row, and goes on to become the first repeat winner of the Indy 500 since Elio Castroneves in 2022. Newgarden is now 7th in points. So to make that big of a leap, I wasn't sure how big of a leap he would make by winning a race. I was like, well, because everybody else obviously at the top is gaining points too. So how much will that really affect him? Now, granted, we still are only 5 races in. It's a race late in the year. If it's his first one since the Indy 500, is not going to be as impactful as winning a race now. But at the same time, I mean, that puts him right back into in the thick of things. To make that big of a leap after just 2 races is pretty remarkable. Now, to kind of keep an eye on that, though, he is 61 points back total. And this is the part of the season last year where Alex Palou took over and opened up the wide gap that he had, where he won at Detroit and Road America and Mid Ohio and that kind of thing. So it's still not the most clear cut run for Josef Newgarden to have, but still 6 of the final 8 races are on ovals where Newgarden is strong, and I think he can. I'm much more confident than I was going into May that he can win the championship, because like I said, after all the penalties and stuff, I was like, he may be dead in the water, but after winning his second straight Indy 500, getting all that momentum plus being 7th in points, I think that does wonders for him.
Yeah, I agree. This is definitely a hot take, especially with the way the season ends with all the ovals. And we all know how good he is on ovals. But also there's a couple road courses in there where we have seen him do really well at as well. So it wouldn't be shocking to see him pick up another win or 2 prior to getting to the next round of ovals. And I think another reason I think this is definitely a hot take is after those penalties, it really lit a fire under him. It was, no, I'm not gonna let my season go this way. And I think as Penske as a whole, as an organization, they came out for 500 at least, and they let it be known who they're still here. Don't sleep on us. Sweeping the front row and then winning the race as well. Yeah, Josef Newgarden he's on a mission right now, and it's some of the moves, like I said, that move to pass a Ward on the outside of turn 3, that was risky. That was a heck of a move. That is a guy that move shows somebody that's on a mission this year. And so I think, yes, hot take. I think I wouldn't be even surprised if he sweeps the ovals, to be honest, and picks up at least 1 win on a road course.
Yeah, no, I was trying to see if because I had a thought that, like, was he in IndyCar the last time they raced at Milwaukee and Nashville? Because that would give him a leg up too. I know it's not Nashville because they stopped in 2008, and he didn't come in until 2012.
I don't think so. Milwaukee?
No, not Nashville.
You said Milwaukee and Nashville.
Right. So I didn't know if I don't know about Milwaukee when the last time they ran there, but I didn't know if he had been on, if he had raced Nashville. That's the one I checked, and he hasn't been on there since 2000 and he came in 2012. 2008 was the last time they ran on the Nashville Oval. So because I was like, man, if he's got a leg up there too on 2 of those places that none of the other drivers have raced on, he would have a leg up there as well. But yeah, no, it's going to be really fun to watch what he's able to do the rest of the year with all this momentum. The other hot or cold question I had coming away from the Indy 500 and into the second half of the season was this: hot or cold? Andretti stock is at an all-time low. And that's a hot take for me as well. I can't really remember a worst May for Andretti Global. You've got Herta was the only car in the top 10 at the GP. You have Ericsson's whole fiasco of a May. He wrecks in practice. He slows down on he's gets put in last chance qualifying, so he's 32nd. Trying to qualify for the race, he forgets which lap he's on, so he slows down on the white flag lap, so he's in danger of being bumped from the race. He even has a fake run where he's trying to cool down his car, so he goes out for a run, but it's not really a run. And then all to culminate in him crashing in turn 1, lap 1 of the race. That was really bad. You also have Herta and Marco, who also both crash. in the 500 as well. Now, granted, Herta was able to get back out there, but I think it was like 30 laps down, something like that. Now, Kirkwood did finish 7th at the 500, and he was in the Fast 12, but that's about as far as their successes go. And just to think about it, I mean, Colton Herta was the points leader heading into May, and now he's 5th. And we were talking about, like, is Colton Herta a legit title contender? And what he was supposed to do was potentially, put on 2 great performances and come out of May. Because, like I said, I felt going into May that he was not really taken seriously as a title contender, because the only reason he was really in the points lead for a time was because of the Penske scandal. And so he would be extra motivated coming into this month, being like, hey, no one, like, I'm only up here because of this reason, but I want to prove that I belong. And it was just a complete dud.
Yeah, I agree. This is a hot take as well. I mean, just stemming from the news of not getting that F1 charter, and then the dud that they put up for the month. I mean, usually Andretti is, even if they're not having a great season, they show up for the 500, and it just, I don't know how to describe it. It was kind of awkward, like,
Yeah.
ooh, this is awkward. Um, I just, that team as a whole, I feel like they need a reboot overall. They need a whole reboot. I hate to say it, but it's true. I you know, but you're going to struggle to do that as well. I mean, I think I don't I it's just I can't put words to really describe what's going on with this team. It just feels like the whole thing's off. Yeah, Colton Herta can run well and is sometimes contending, but other times this team is completely on the outside, and it's head scratching. Um, I mean, this was used to be one of the elite teams in IndyCar, and they've fallen hard. So you hope that they can right that ship, because IndyCar wouldn't be the same without a competitive Andretti team.
Maybe Andretti Hendrick coming up coming up in the future.
Can't
Probably not.
you can't Andretti would have to switch to Chevy.
Oh, true. But yeah, no, yeah, because I almost, the question almost was, are they even a tier? But I didn't want to do the same thing we did with McLaren. But I was like, man, heck, going into this year, I might have put Andretti even ahead of McLaren. Now I think Andretti, if we're considering them as still a top tier team, I wouldn't have them above. I think I'd have them 4th out of all the teams right now, because they just, yeah, you're like you said. I mean, they used to be such a force and and there used to be at least one driver that was like in the mix. And Colton Herta's been there, but he's not been as strong. And Kirkwood's shown some flashes here and there, but they don't seem like a team right now that, like, I can't think, like, if I was even with Colton Herta as 5th, like, if you asked me, like, who are the championship contenders right now, I don't know that I would say Colton Herta is.
Mm-mm. Well, it also speaks to, when you look at the organization as a whole, and one of your all-time best drivers, fan favorite, it doesn't work for your team. Like, a lot of these guys that have been really good drivers in the past stick around with their teams and find roles within it. And I'm talking about Tony Kanaan. Tony Kanaan, nothing to do with Andretti. Tony Kanaan is all on board with Arrow McLaren. And I think that speaks volumes in itself as well. It's not like TK ran a ton with Arrow McLaren, his a lot. I mean, yeah, his success in the 500, his one win came with Vassar Sullivan, but still, I think it's a little bit telling there of what's going on.
For sure.
Not really telling, but it's interesting, because you see Dario Franchitti, he's with Ganassi, and so on and so on. These older drivers that are done racing that now work with their teams as strategists or driver coaches or whatever it might be. And TK decided to stick with Arrow McLaren.
Yeah, I want to see them bounce back, but it's not looking great in the Andretti camp coming out of the Indy 500. And looking towards this weekend, before we get out of here, I want to do some predictions for the Detroit Grand Prix on the streets of Detroit. Should be a fun race. Really excited for it. We're going to name a dark horse and who we think is going to win her. My dark horse for this race is actually Marcus Armstrong. Yes, he had a disappointing 500, but he did finish 5th at the Indy GP. He finished 8th at Detroit last season, the highest finishing rookie. He has 0 podiums in a season and a half in IndyCar, and like a lot of his finishes are not super great. I mean, I think maybe like 8th or 9th is about like the highest he normally runs. So for him to get 5th at the Indy GP is good. And to run last year at Detroit pretty solidly, I think is good. So I'm going with Marcus Armstrong. If there's a driver that might sneak up there and grab a sneaky win, I think it might be him. But as far as who I think is going to win this weekend at Detroit, I'm going to go with Alexander Rossi. McLaren is coming off of a fantastic month of May. Rossi was in the mix in Indy, and I think the momentum continues into Detroit, where Rossi also finished top 5 a year ago as well. So one of the better runs for Rossi came last year at Detroit. So I think he gets in the mix, he wins the race, and gets his first win with Arrow McLaren.
So my dark horse, I'm actually going to go with Will Power here. Look, Will Power had a really good month of May going. The Grand Prix ran really well, podium, qualified up front for the 500, the car just snapped on him, got loose, and ended his day in the 500. He just said it just they had some difficulties with the car that day, but otherwise, a really solid month of May for him. And I think, we still see that fire that we saw from him post Sancio Grand Prix in his post-race interview. I think it comes together and he finds his way back to the top of the podium. He's my dark horse. But I think overall, I like your pick with Arrow McLaren, but I'm going with Pato O'Ward to come out on top. I think, he's going to use that, I don't know, that anger, that sadness, or whatever it was, all of the emotions from how close he came. It's not the Indy 500, but he wants to get up there. He wants to win. He wants to win now. He's so close, but yet so far away. He's gotten that taste. So give me Pato O'Ward to come home with the victory this weekend.
Yeah, I like that.
I think Chevy. I do think Chevy comes home with the win, being in the Motor City. They have, coming off of a really strong month of May for that manufacturer overall. I think they carry that right into Detroit.
I think so too. I think I do like that pick of Pato O'Ward. That was almost my pick as well. But I went ahead and went with Rossi. But yeah, no, I like that pick of O'Ward for those very reasons. I mean, he's going to have that drive, that fire to win. And so he very well could end up being your Detroit Grand Prix winner. Well, that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for hanging out. Remember, if you're listening to the podcast on the podcast app, we are on YouTube. Go over to 3C Media on YouTube, subscribe, hit the bell. You guys killed it with support during the month of May. We thank you so much for that. Check us out on TikTok as well, 3C Media. Go over to the podcast apps. If you're on the YouTube channel, go over to the podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever podcasts can be heard, you can hear the Crash Course Podcast. Find us, 3C Media on Facebook, and at 3C Media Sports on Twitter. You can find me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. B. Scott, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
We're actually going to take our normal summer hiatus. So just make sure you're locked into the socials as we enter the summer. But there will be some content mixed in here and there. So get excited. Enjoy the rest of the IndyCar season, or at least up until we come back. But yeah, we're going on our normal hiatus. Check out, keep locked into our socials for more information, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good week, everybody.